2 bars. Move that light. Let's see.
There we go. There we go. Now you got me. How's that?
Good.
Right on time.
Live. Long time no see.
Yeah, buddy. How you been? Good to catch up after all these years.
Yeah. Drank a little bit more than I thought I would in that last one.
What's that?
Drank a little bit more wine than I thought I would.
I know. It's still hard for me to just feels unethical to spit out great wine, but sometimes I guess I got to do it. Although, it's after 5 o'clock now, so I think I'm done spitting.
Yeah, I can walk home.
Yeah, exactly. And I am home, so good. All right. So I think are we ready to just get ripping?
Let's do it.
Cool. Start with the Chardonnay.
Yeah, we got a good amount of people on.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey guys, welcome everybody to and this is, please bear with us as this is our first time doing this. So if we screw up, it's not our fault, I guess. if it was Josh's first time making wine and the wine was bad, then we'd ask. But but at least the wine's going to be good. Well, hey, welcome. We're going to talk about a few wines today, and then we'll answer some questions that some of you have sent to us. And then maybe toward the end, we'd try to make this a little more interactive. So first up, we've got our Doubleback Chardonnay. This is the second time we've made Doubleback Chardonnay. We bring our Chardonnay grapes in, and the very best of the best gets to fly the Doubleback label with Chardonnay. When we started contemplating making some Chard, I think Josh and I both felt the same way. We're not, historically hadn't been real Chardonnay geeks. But then we started drinking some Chardonnays from the old world and started experimenting with some wines in the Chardonnay realm that all of a sudden we discovered were really, really interesting wines. And so we set out to embark on this plan, and one of the big epiphanies, and then I'll get out of the way and let Josh actually talk about the wine. But one of the things that shocked me the most when it came time to start doing blending trials was that I always thought I didn't like oak in Chardonnay. Right? I thought that oak was something that overtook the wine and just made it just this buttery, sweet, kind of boring one-note wine. Well, it turns out that actually is not the case. Josh made a tough call to in that first vintage to harvest a couple of weeks before everybody else in the valley was bringing in Chardonnay. But it turns out if the wine has good natural acid, it stands up and marries with the oak and becomes this really beautiful expression of the Chardonnay grape. So I'll let Josh talk about the winemaking in this, but believe it or not, if you're sipping this along with us, that's a lot of French oak that you're tasting on the Chardonnay, which not very many people I think would guess. But with that, I'll turn it over to Josh and talk about what's in the bottle.
Yeah, for sure. First off, just want to say thank you everyone for tuning in. It's certainly weird to talk to a camera and not see everyone's beautiful faces. But I also want to encourage everyone to drink along with us. This is supposed to be a fun thing, so please enjoy the wine. So this is a 2018 Doubleback Chardonnay. Growing up, I thought Chardonnay was only what my mom drank and wasn't very cool at all. And I had the opportunity to go down to Argentina and work for Paul Hobbs, who's a famous California winemaker, and really, really enjoyed making Chardonnay down there. And that was a big turning point for me. Coming out of South America with him, I got big into white Burgundy, and Drew and I started talking, and eventually we had a couple acres of Chardonnay planted for us up on the eastern side of the Walla Walla Valley AVA. And that's an important distinction when we thought, what kind of Chardonnay would we make? What kind of Chardonnay would be, able to be put under a Doubleback bottle and glass and printing. And it was kind of that, old world white Burgundy style. And so we sought out this later ripening, higher acid site, low. So we wanted high acid, low alcohol, something that we could, improve with oak, but not have the oak be the driver, have the fruit be the driver. And that's been doable so far. We've been really happy. So we made the first vintage of this in 2016. We made a really small amount, 75 cases, I think, roughly. We actually made the really difficult decision to skip a year in 2017 just because the fruit quality wasn't up to our standards. And then, coming back in 2018, we narrowed this down. We even went from extended the bottle aging on this in 2018. So it's been over a year since we've had this wine back in our lineup. And to be honest, we thought we would just have this wine, the Chardonnay and the Merlot, only in our tasting room and never release it. So, silver lining maybe to this whole pandemic might be that we got to release these wines to you guys and sit here and talk about them and have fun.
Yeah, Josh, that was one of the things I almost had just forgotten that we skipped an entire vintage on Doubleback Chardonnay just simply because we didn't feel like it was up to par to carry that label. But in that vintage when we skipped, the Elizabeth Chardonnay was friggin' fantastic. So,
Yeah.
The Elizabeth Chardonnay benefited from the fact that we didn't make Doubleback that Chardonnay that year. So we got some questions from some of you that sent in some questions early, and I know some of you will interact with in real time. But Josh, Leo and Joan from Arlington, Virginia want to know how much time does the Doubleback Chard spend in oak?
Yeah, good question. So, and like Drew said, it's fun to break down that stereotype that these oak Chardonnays have to be these big butter bombs that we've gotten used to and probably mostly hate and coming out of California. So this was 18 months, all neutral, all French oak. About half of it was new French oak. So, and that's all aged sur lees, so aged right on the lees, trying to develop mouthfeel and texture in the wine and really, make something serious. And as long as you have that acid backbone to stand up to the oak, it works out pretty well for us. So we actually, Mark Jones asked on the live part, how's this Chard different than the Elizabeth? We actually, so the Elizabeth, we bring everything in. We have 3 different Burgundy clones of Chardonnay, all from the same vineyard, all single vineyard, Kenny Hill. We bring everything in with the intention of trying, just like Doubleback, just like the Cabernet, with the intention of trying to make it into the Doubleback Chardonnay. And we cut that down. It's about 4 acres, I think, that we have. And so, we have like 30 barrels of Chardonnay. And you cut that down into we cut 30 barrels of Chardonnay down into 4 just to make Doubleback. And so the rest of that goes into Elizabeth. There's also in Elizabeth some stainless steel and also some concrete. So it's a little bit more bright and fresh, and we don't actually run the Elizabeth through that secondary fermentation, which helps stabilize the wine and kind of softens it up. So Elizabeth has a little bit more acid, it's a little bit more bright and crisp and clean. And then the Doubleback Chardonnay has that, I like to, like, write in my tasting notes, it was like, think of like biting into a green apple and then also like eating some whipped cream. It was like that perfect combination. So it's a pretty fun wine. So Drew, Heather and Mike from Norfolk, Virginia asked, I'd love to know what Drew and Josh's favorite snack pairing is with the new Chardonnay. One of our favorite pairings with Chardonnay is Cape Cod potato chips, especially after a day at the beach.
Well,
actually,
first, yeah, no, I love Cape Cod potato chips. But first, I have to correct you. My dad was in the military back there, and it's Norfolk, Virginia. If you're from back there, if you're from Massachusetts, it's Norfolk, which the Massachusetts people drop all of their R's, but then they added one back in place of the L in Norfolk, so it's Norfolk in Massachusetts. So, but it's Norfolk, Virginia, Josh. So just, I don't want you to insult anybody back there right out of the gates.
Yeah.
I was actually, we saw these questions yesterday, and I was thinking about this one. and it was interesting to me because our wines across the board, they're kind of foodie wines. You know, they have structure and they're designed to go with food and stand up to you know, maybe different styles of food, and they're pretty diverse because they're balanced wines. And then I had this wine last night with a couple of friends, and you know what? I think this is the one wine in our lineup that I just want to drink by itself. And that's honest truth. I think there's enough going on here. There's enough complexity. There's that sweetness. There's length to it. You know, all of this. And I wouldn't say that about any other wine in our lineup. But this Doubleback Chardonnay, I simply want to just drink it by itself.
I love that. I love that.
How about you, Josh? Anything you want to recommend for people out there if they're
No, I mean, so often I get into that same mindset where I just want to really enjoy the wine.
right?
There's one like funny anecdotal story. It's usually, you know, during harvest, late in harvest. I had a weak moment during harvest once where I, you know, multiple times where I had to go get fast food. You know, you get really hungry and work a lot of hours, and opened up a chicken sandwich, I think from Burger King, I think, and had Doubleback Chardonnay with it, and it was
There you go.
unbelievably great. And it's I think it's those great kind of funny, hardworking moments in winemaking that I think you remember the most. So that was one thing I had.
We could
Embarrassed.
admit our other weak moment as we were driving out one morning to go out to the vineyards. We were taking a group out there, and we stopped to get a little snack, and we're at this little gas station mini mart down in Milton Freewater, and we walk in, and kind of happened to be standing by the heater at the overhead heater at the gas station, and I'm kind of looking longingly at these beef and bean burritos, and Josh looks over at me, and we sort of have one of those moments where we make eye contact. We're like, I won't tell if you won't tell. Okay, deal. And so, oh man, those were delicious gas station burritos.
Time and a place, for sure.
Time and a place. So let's move on. Let's go to the Merlot. We have not. It's the first time we've ever bottled a Merlot on its own, and you know, it's interesting. So it gets the Doubleback label. You can see this one, Josh. We had a little issue. You might want to talk to. We're losing the T on Merlot, which makes it easier for me to pronounce, but it's fallen off there. Must have been rubbing in the box. But you know, Merlot really took a huge dive a number of years ago, and most of you guys know this. But when the movie Sideways came out, there's never been a movie that I don't think, at least as far as I can tell, there's never been a movie, or as far as I know, there's never been a movie that directly affected an industry like the movie Sideways affected the Merlot world. All of a sudden, Merlot wasn't cool anymore. And we had a funny moment, or an interesting moment, at the winery when we had the guy that wrote the script for Sideways came, and he came as part of a Merlot convention. So I was chatting him up, and I was like, man, you got a big set of balls showing up at a Merlot convention, because you're the guy that ruined Merlot, right? You wrote Sideways and you ruined Merlot. And his point was, and I think this is something that actually is really true, he said, no, I didn't. I saved Merlot because people were making some really crappy wine, and they were slapping a Merlot name on it and pushing it out to the public, and they were giving Merlot a bad name. In Walla Walla, and at Leonetti, where Josh grew up under the tutelage of Chris and Gary Figgins, they make some of the best Merlot in the entire world. And I think, you know, Josh and I both agree that you take a Leonetti Merlot and take the Pepsi Challenge with anybody in America, and possibly, you know, anybody in the world. So there is world-class Merlot in the Walla Walla Valley, and there has been for a long time. We're especially gratified to be able to lay our hands on some of the very best of it. And then this year we just decided we were going to actually bottle some Merlot on its own. And originally, it's super small production. We don't have anymore, which is sort of funny to talk about wine that we don't have anymore, but we're not very good at business. So, you know, originally it's just going to be kind of a fun, just for fun thing that we were going to sell only at the tasting room and only at the wine bars. But when this all happened, we decided to offer it for sale, and the response was overwhelming. It sold out so quickly. So apparently there are a lot of people out there that agree with us that Merlot is on its way back. I think it's beautiful wine. And as Josh likes to say, it's Cabernet drinkers Merlot. But Josh, talk about what's in the bottle here and how we ended up getting to this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree with you more on what you said. Merlot, growing up in Leonetti, it's just like Cabernet to me. It's in my blood, and good Merlot though. And there's a big difference there. Merlot's it's an early ripening grape. You can get good crop loads on it, and so there's a lot of, especially it used to be like you said, Drew, a lot of bad Merlot made out there that gave it a bad name. So when you look at Walla Walla being such a diverse valley, when we wanted to make Merlot, and I had the great luxury of growing up at Leonetti and watching them make mistakes so that I could do it right later in my career. And so there's the west side of the valley, like Seven Hills, close to where we get Bob Healy. At Bob Healy we mostly have Cabernet, which is a late ripening varietal, but Merlot out there is just really pretty aromatically, but really thin too, and kind of boring. And if you go, everyone, a lot of you should know by now. I see a lot of familiar names. Every inch towards the Blue Mountains you go, you gain an inch of rainfall, and also it gets quite a bit cooler. And so you go up to, all of the Merlot in this wine is all from Figgins Estate Vineyard, where my alma mater, if you will, and very high clay content soils, late ripening. We picked this Merlot block at almost the same time that we pick our Cabernet from Bob Healy and McQueen. And to put that into perspective, when we had the blocks of Merlot at Seven Hills Vineyard, we picked those almost a month before that. And so we get these really developed, deep, concentrated, structured wines that are big mid palate. Merlot is building mid palate, especially on Cabernet blends. So you get these big mid palates, and then you also get structure and acidity because you're on the east side of the valley, where you get these big diurnal swings of temperature swings, and you get extended hang time. So they're just really great wines. And so we balanced this out with a little bit of Cabernet Franc. So first wine, the first Cab Franc that we ever got off of our estate vineyard Lafort. And ever since we got it in the winery door that year during harvest, it was Drew and I and our cellar master Joe, probably our favorite, and Mara, our favorite lot in the cellar. And for a long time we couldn't get rid of that wine because we kept coming back to it like, this is incredible. And that was third leaf fruit, so I have high expectations for that. And then there's just a small amount of Cabernet Sauvignon from McQueen, and that really balances it out. And so it's a really, like Drew said, a Cabernet drinker Merlot. This will age for 30, 40 years easily. So Drew, what do you think is an interesting, I can read, I swear. Yeah. One thing that would be interesting from the virtual tasting, we could discuss the rationale behind our blending grapes. So yeah. What is your perspective on Cab Franc, and what do you think we could do with that?
Cab Franc, going back to my very, very early wine, experiences, Cab Franc has been something that I've always loved. Like one of my very first memorable wine experiences from Napa was with Viader Cabernet, which is actually, I don't even know if it was labeled as Cabernet at that point, but it was Cabernet and Cab Franc exclusively. Fell in love with that wine. And then you go to Bordeaux, and now you're talking Cheval Blanc. You're talking about these amazing world-class wines, and there's some spiciness to Cab Franc. There's just some really interesting notes to it, and it's sort of funny because when we planted our very first vineyard way back in, I think it was 2003, 2004, down in Echo, Oregon, we planted Cabernet Sauvignon, and then we planted Cab Franc, was the second most planted grape down there, and then kind of lost touch with it. And now coming back to it and finding that I still absolutely love that varietal. And now having a chance to blend that with some Merlot, and then of course it's going to make it into some of the other wines as well, is really, really cool. And so I'm super excited about the future of Cab Franc. I don't know if we'll ever decide to bottle some on its own. Maybe we will. But as a blending varietal and for the impact it's going to have on all of our wines, I'm really excited about
Yeah, that's awesome.
it. Yeah.
We actually, for the
Oh,
first time this year, we have a Cabernet Franc coming online at McQueen Vineyard too. So 2020. I'm really excited to get Cabernet Franc off of McQueen. Should be a really fun. Should be a great site for the varietal. I'm really interested to get into that and continue to see that program grow.
Yeah. Yeah, Leo and Joan sent us a question also about the what are the grapes that go into Doubleback are same site as this Merlot designate, but I think you touched on that, Josh, already. I'm not sure a lot of people understand, the east side, west side, rivalry in Walla Walla. A lot of winemaker gang members that really like to protect their turf. It gets pretty violent. They throw grapes at each other. It's really, really terrifying. A lot of slap fighting between the winemakers. It gets really awful.
Marty Club's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I wouldn't cross Marty. Actually, yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the cab, Josh. Man, it pains me to, like, when we're doing this, it pains me to actually dump these special wines out, but in the interest of being sober at the end of this, I will dump some of this out.
So Drew, I think it's a good time. Maybe give the background on how you got into Doubleback, what Doubleback came to be, etc.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there are a lot of people on this that probably are at least somewhat familiar. So I'll keep it very, very brief. But I had the great privilege of growing up in Walla Walla, Washington. And for those of you that haven't been to Walla Walla, please go to Walla Walla. Come see us when you can. Again, when we're allowed to travel again, come see us at Walla Walla. Magical place to grow up. Went to school up at Washington State. Played football up there. Got to go off and play professional football for 14 years. And when I was done with that, I was able to return home to Walla Walla and start a wine business. And that's where the name Doubleback comes from. It's not a football term or any of that. It's just about returning home and returning to your roots. So returned home, doubled back to Doubleback to Walla Walla, started a wine business, and I think the one thing that hopefully, those of you who I would imagine many of you are longtime supporters of our business, and hopefully this comes through because it's really true and it's really important to us. It's important that people know that everything we do is truly authentic. There's no bullshit in any piece of our business. We bought land, planted a vineyard. Josh and before him, Chris and our entire team now, they try to make it the purest expression of place that they can in the bottle. And we're blessed with an amazing place to do that. And over time, we have had the discussions about, changing our profile on some of the wines and chasing some scores, because there are stylistic differences where some of these massive, super high alcohol, super extracted wines, and it always pisses us off. But we decided to stay true to who we were at the start. We make wines we like to drink, which, means a little more elegant style, still balanced, but elegance doesn't mean wimpy. You can, wines, you can have elegance and balance, but still have strength and still have length and so on. So that's really, as short as I can tell it, how this all came to be. Been really, really fortunate to cheat the system and have, Chris Figgins as our initial winemaker, and then having Josh take over for Chris and take us to the next level and to explore these these different new and interesting wines. It's been a real privilege, and I think I was saying earlier, I get to, it's a little bit, it's somewhat similar to my previous job as a quarterback, where I've got a bunch of guys that do the brutal hard work, and then I get to be the guy that stands up and takes all the credit when we win. So it's kind of fun. We've got a kick-ass team working for us, and I'm incredibly proud to call it our business. And back to the wine, Doubleback was our original reason for being. We started the winery with only one wine. Obviously, we branched out from there. But that one wine is still our reason for being. It will always be the wine that we give the very most attention to. And before I turn it over for Josh, one of the coolest moments for me, and this happens, once or twice a year, where we'll be at some wine event or whatever, lots of wine being poured, and I'll find myself walking around with a glass of wine, and it truly happens like a couple times a year. Well, I'll have a sip of wine and like, wow, that's good. Which one's that? Oh, that's ours, right? And so it's like one of those moments where like, okay, we've been at this for a long time. Anytime you do something for a long time, you can start to become hypercritical of it. But at the end of the day, I still really, really love, what we're making in Doubleback Cabernet. Hopefully you guys do too, and keep buying it. But if not, we got lots of wine to drink and we enjoy it. So I'll turn it over to Josh, talk about what's in the glass.
Yeah, so this is a 2017 Cabernet. Was another great vintage. I mean, we've been on a string of great vintages since 2012. And to be honest, my entire career, I feel like I've been on a string of great vintages. We've had cooler years like 2010 and 11, but on a personal level, those wines are really fantastic. So we're really blessed here in Walla Walla to have this growing conditions like we do. So 17 was very similar to 16, maybe a little warmer, but going in, the big differentiating factor was going into about Labor Day weekend, 2017. There was a lot of Canadian wildfires going on, and it created this really high layer of smoke that really kind of clouded all of Eastern Washington and Oregon. And the weird phenomenon that we saw there was going into the growing season, we'd get these like 100-degree temperature forecasts. And, in a year, coming off of 2015, where we had many days over 100 degrees, that was, difficult. That made it hard and changes your game plan going into the cellar and into the fermentation. And so, you don't like to see that generally. But the silver lining here, you never like to see, wildfires going on, but the wildfire smoke really kind of shaded the valley, and we only really got into like the mid 80s for like 2 weeks straight. And it really just allowed us to extend our growing season and pick into late October, which really gave great balance to the wines. And basically what I ended up doing was waiting until the acids fell out of the grapes and ended up picking cabs at great flavors and great balance profiles. And so, going all the way through the cellar, the wines were, fairly austere at first, but really turned a corner after about 10 or 12 months. And, honestly think some of the best wines we've made yet. So this is a 89% Cabernet. There's Figgins Estate Merlot in there, and Seven Hills Vineyard Cabernet are the only two lots that aren't estate grown. And, it's hard to get away from that Figgins Merlot. Just rounded out that Cabernet that year. And so it really worked out. Gives the wine a little bit of more mid-palate mouthfeel. So, we've been, like I said, just blessed to be on a string of great vintages, and 17 just continues to build on that.
Yeah, big thanks to Chris Figgins. Keep selling us that Figgins Merlot, buddy. I know you charge a lot for it, and we understand it, but we sure like it. Hey, Josh, Jim from Fairhaven, Mass says, as good as the Doubleback is, are there aspects that the team is still trying to tweak to make it even better? Any insights in what areas that you're working to get better at? I want to answer this first, and then I'll hand it over to you. But it kind of goes to, background in sports, right? We always said that when you're practicing, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're never staying the same. If you ever get to the point where you can't improve anymore, then you got to find something else to do. And it's been really gratifying to me to watch Josh and the rest of the team, building off of a great platform to continue to improve year over year, and not just sit back and rest on their laurels and just sit still. So, Josh, I'll let you jump in, but I just had to say that because I've witnessed it. I get to watch it. I get to taste it in the bottle. But talk about specific areas that you feel like we're continuing to improve.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Drew said. I reading a Harvard Business Review book right now, and one of the quotes, I actually have it on my laptop right here, is "Don't get stuck in the rituals of success." And I've had that on my laptop for a long time that I reflect on. And there's like this year our Jeb Dunnick scores just came out, and we were top. It was us and Colcita, Leonetti, and Cayuse were the top Cabernets in the state. And you can take that as a small win and a great feeling, but there's obviously we can do better for sure. And I remember specifically there was one time during harvest, it was a cool feeling. It was late at night. I was at the winery alone doing pump overs, and I think Drew called me, and I said, "Man," and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm doing pump overs. It's like going to church. It's just this holy feeling in the winery late at night. You're dead tired, alone by yourself, and I said, "Man, I'm so excited right now, seeing what I see in the fermenters, because I really feel like we've done really well, but we're really getting a lot better." And that was I remember multiple times like that where it's like, wow, we're turning a corner here, and we're operating at a high level. So, some of the specific things we're doing is, you think about, in the grand world of wine, our vineyards are still very young. And so we're really still just barely getting to know what we're doing in those vineyards, and spending more and more time in there, understanding which rows are the best, which, aspects are the best. How can we develop new plantings of that same vineyard site better than what we did, 13, 14 years ago? And so it's just this, constant state of trying to get better. And so, and in the winery, Joe and I, more oxygen on McQueen Cabernet, on primary fermentations, trying to really develop mouthfeel early on, beat it up early, and then let it shut down in the winery on its own. This year, we're aging in the 2018 cab. We have Cabernet for Doubleback in concrete out of oak. So we're backing out on our new oak profile. And we have Stockinger casks that we ordered this year for this 2020 harvest. And so we really feel like, we're really proud of where we're at, but we really feel like we can do better. And I think, I remember my dad always told me that I got bored really easily, and I always needed to be challenged. And I think that's the coolest thing about winemaking is I really do feel like we can get better, and that's an exciting thing to be a part of. So Drew, is it possible, BJ and Catherine Lathan from Rock Hill, South Carolina? I don't know if that's the right,
I'm pretty sure that's the right pronunciation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with it. But they asked you, is it possible, and do you plan on having a single vineyard Cabernet in the future? I actually love this question because I think as a winemaker, you taste all the single vineyard wines all the time in the cellar. So I'm curious to hear this.
Yeah, one of the advantages I had in starting this business is that I am my target customer. I'm a wine collector, wine consumer. Actually, right now, far more on the consumption side, as I think a lot of people are while you're quarantined. But it's a different answer for some of our different brands. For me, what Doubleback has been and always will be, probably, never say never, but Doubleback to me represents the very best wine we can make every year as a Cabernet, right? Now we decided to label it Cabernet. The estate reserve is not designated by varietal, and that's very, very small. So under the Doubleback label, um, it's not currently our intention to do single vineyard wines under the Doubleback label. What Doubleback is going to be, Doubleback Cabernet every year is going to be the very best Cabernet-based wine that we can make from the Walla Walla Valley every single year, and you can rely on that. Now, if you take that and you talk about the new project that we're working on with Josh, it's the Bledsoe McDaniels label. We are going to do single vineyard designate Syrahs. And these will be small production. They're kind of geeky wines. Some of you probably have had our LaFour Syrah that we released with a white label last year. Was maybe my personal favorite thing that we made last year. I mean, I hate to say that, but maybe just because it was different and interesting and outside of what we've done in the past. But those will be those vineyard specific, vineyard designate wines, where we can kind of geek out on the soil profile and geek out on the weather and the elevation and irrigation and, you know, all of the things that go into terroir. But in terms of Doubleback, what I feel like as a consumer, I would personally want, and therefore what we're doing currently as a business, is that label simply represents the best Cabernet we can make from the Walla Walla Valley every single year. And it's just as simple as that. And we'll leave it there. Obviously, we're making a little bit of Chardonnay, we're making a little Estate Reserve, but the Doubleback Cabernet is the one that's always just going to have that as its tagline.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, in a lot of ways, I've always viewed it as trying to be like the first growth of Walla Walla, you know, and really setting that bar.
Mm-hmm.
So should we go on to the State Reserve?
If we must. So here we go. State Reserve 2017. This is bottle number 1055. We used to hand number, if many of you remember, we used to hand number every single bottle that we made in Doubleback, but once we got to over 2,000 cases, that became cumbersome and ultimately not as special. But the Estate Reserve still gets individually hand numbered. So on the Estate Reserve, we decided to do this a couple years ago, and you know, really, when we initially had the conversation, you know, Josh brought it up to me and said, "Hey, you know, Joe and I have been in the cellar, and you know, we really feel like, as special as everything is down there, there are just a few barrels that are kind of rising to the very, very top. You know, what do you think about doing just really small production? You know, just 2, 3, 4 barrels of Estate Reserve." And my question at that time was, can we do that without reducing the quality of the Doubleback Cabernet? Because as I said just a minute ago, that's our flagship. That's what we're always going to rely on. And Josh said, yes, we can. We can pull 3 barrels aside that are extremely special and not do any damage to the flagship Doubleback Cabernet. Like, okay, as long as we can maintain what we've built in Doubleback, then let's do it. And so now what we do, you know, every year is Josh and Joe, they keep an eye on everything in the cellar, as they do, and they just track barrels as they age, and then they start putting together different blending trials of different barrels. And that's when Mara and I get to join the extremely difficult work of doing blending trials. It's just so tiresome to sit and drink wine and pick which one of these magical wines is the very best. But we do. It's actually quite hard, to be honest, because you're splitting hairs at a very, very high level when it comes to determining what goes into the Estate Reserve. Each time we do blending trials, you know, sit there like, well, I would be really proud to have my name on any of these blends, but ultimately we have to make a decision as to what we think is the very, very best blend every year, and that becomes the Estate Reserve. So, like I say, we don't make very much of it. It all sells out and goes away really quickly. But I sure enjoy drinking it. So nice job, Josh. I'll let you go now.
Yeah, it's especially, you know, we've talked about this so often lately with the 2018 vintage, which, you know, turning out to be one of my favorite vintages of all time, is the difficulty in finalizing these blends when there's so much good wine. And it's been a real challenge, but it's also a lot of fun, and really, you know, forces you to be open and honest and think intrinsically about, what is this going to look like now? What's it look like when we release it? And what's it look like 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road? Because, you know, this is an icon of Washington Cabernet in a lot of ways, this wine, and Doubleback for that matter. And so, you know, the blending trials are just, you know, a real big decision. But as a winemaker, I think it's, you know, most interesting, this project, because you spend so much time in your own estate vineyards. And when you buy fruit, it's one thing, but when you really farm and then take that farming practice into a winery and transform that into something else, there's a ton of ownership there. And, you know, Drew, you know, retired from the NFL, bought a piece of property, you know, that was 2007 when these vines were planted. And so, you know, he started a legacy there that you still have to continue to build on. And it's just really cool to see that come into a bottle and be able to tell that story through the bottle. And it's a pretty cool project. It's not something that we take lightly. So
Pretty fun.
Drew, where'd the question go? So Richard Davis from Northeastern Massachusetts asked, at a family dinner, we did a tasting. I won't name the vintages. I don't want to give them away. One was far and away the favorite, but how does the 2017 Cab compare, or Reserve, compare to other vintages? And I'll also add on, what are your favorite vintages?
Yeah. You know, as I indicated earlier, and I think I can actually, you know, prove this. I mean, you can have your opinion, but then there's also, you know, a piece to prove. And we did an even year vertical tasting at the winery last year, and the current release at that point was 2016, and 2016 won. I think there was a close to a tie. And then now 2017, even though it's really young, I mean, it's sort of not fair to a top flight Cabernet to drink it when it's a puppy. Actually, you know, I think Josh does the same, but when we have to do our tasting notes, we'll do it over 3 or 4 days where we'll leave the bottle open and let it oxidize and sort of prematurely age over a course. And it's usually like day 3 or 4 where it really starts to show. So it's honestly, it's not that fair to judge these wines when they're young. And I haven't done side by side 2017 with previous vintages yet, so I can't prove it right now. But as I indicated earlier, I think the whole team is continuing to get better. And so these are probably the best wines we've ever made. I can't, you know, show you that, you know, quantitatively and with a, you know, a panel or blind tasting or any of that stuff. But they're probably the best wines we've ever made. Now, as far as previous vintages, 2008 will always be a favorite of mine. 2007 was our very first vintage. 2008 is great, just a great vintage in Washington, and it was still sourced fruit. It wasn't estate fruit. And you know, every time we've opened one of those, I'm like, okay, that's friggin' awesome. Matter of fact, I think the 2008 was the one that maybe tied with the 16 when we did that even year vertical. And then, you know, there's also, and I know any winemaker that's listening to this, or any winemaker that you would talk to, winemakers, like most of us, you know, they don't want to talk about when times are easy. You know, they don't want to talk about, well, you know, 2018, well, it was a perfect growing year. We didn't really have to do very much. You know, I was like, okay, well, that's boring. I want to talk about the vineyards where it was tough and it was brutal, and you had to make hard decisions, and you know, it was touch and go and sleepless nights and all of those things. And 2011 was that year. I remember at that point talking to Chris Figgins. I was driving into Walla Walla and fairly new in the business. Like, it hadn't been warm all summer, and driving into Walla Walla, and I don't know, it was probably I don't know, late July, early August. I'm like, it's like, how we doing? It's like, oh, don't worry, rookie. You know, we're gonna be fine. We're a couple weeks behind, but it's gonna catch up. And I came back a month later. You know, probably I want to say it was like I don't know, mid-September. And I'm driving in, and I felt like we were driving into Seattle. It was just low cloud cover, kind of drizzly rain. And I called Chris, like, how about now? And he goes, yeah, we might want to start worrying a little bit. And but we made the decision at that point. We went into the vineyard and we dropped, I want to say close to half of the fruit in the vineyards, so that we, you know, whatever fruit was left, the vines could focus their energy on ripening whatever was left. And then thankfully, you know, October came around and we had a nice warm October that got most everything all the way ripe. And so it's, you know, if you put all of our wines in a lineup, the 2011 stylistically is one that's going to stand out as different. More of kind of an old world style wine. You know, it's got a little more austerity to it. But that one will always be one that I'm proud of because we had to make hard decisions. We had to sacrifice, you know, close to half the fruit in our vineyards to Mother Nature, but still ended up making wine that we were really proud of. And then the last thing I'll say is that the wine that I'm most proud of is the one that we're making in the future, because I know Josh and the squad are going to continue to get better.
Yeah, and I know it's you know, I was thinking about it last couple nights ago. Chris posted a video tasting our wine and reminiscing on the past. And you know, Chris meant so much to me in my career and my life. And you know, it's I like to say it was figuratively big shoes to fill when I took the position, but it was really cool. It dawned on me that we've gotten better reviews every single year on Doubleback since then, and and that's just hats off to our team, and you know, and then the commitment, I think, to just trying to be better every year, and that's
Absolutely.
a cool progression to do. Growing up at Leonetti, I remember I was pretty freaking nervous going into, you know, some of those early harvests that when I took over. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
So I did. This one's actually pretty interesting, Josh, and I'll answer it. But Jim from Fairhaven says, you know, as a winemaker, must be some desire to try some crazy experiments. Any good stories to share about fun attempts and what worked and what didn't?
yeah, there's a ton of them on both sides. There's some funny stories. We've actually 2 days ago we made ice wine. Cheated a little bit, but had some Chardonnay that in the freezer for 6 months now, Joe. And so making a little ice wine for fun. So if we see you at one of our winemaker dinners, you might get to enjoy that here in the future. I've made cherry wine before, which was awful. But on the flip side of that, there's been a lot of experiments that we've done really well. So, you know, I would say Lafort Cabernet. You know, Cabernet on the rocks I had 2 years ago, I had a really well-known wine drinker in Washington tell me, you know, why do you blend Cabernet from the rocks into your Cabernet from the hillside? And I said, well, because I think it's better. And he said, I don't think so. I think they'd be better, you know, as separate. And, you know, critics will prove it wrong, but it's something that we've believed in since 2009. And when you think about McQueen being all tannin and acid and Lafort being the exact opposite of that, they're the perfect merriment together to make that first growth Cabernet. But we've also done things like we're aging Cabernet in concrete right now. I don't know anyone else in the valley doing that. We have new casks that we're going to be aging Cabernet in. It took us a few years on the Syrah side of things to really nail down whole cluster fermentation. So that was an experiment that I wasn't, really familiar with that it took a while to get used to. So yeah, there's constant experiments that we are trying, and that goes into pushing the boundaries to try to get better. And I think that's the important thing. I think, Drew, you should talk about maybe tease the new varietal that we're looking at in the future.
So it's kind of funny because we my favorite wines in the world are Nebbiolo wines from northern Italy. The nicely aged Barolo it's my favorite wine. It's just like I make no bones about it. And so we've actually now started contemplating experimenting planting some Nebbiolo in Washington, in Walla Walla. The sad thing, for me, we were talking with one of the wine writers today, with Owen, and if you look at great Barolo, and then you want to make that, well, so we're probably 2 years out from planting any Nebbiolo, and then 3 years before you have fruit, 7 years before it's fully mature. So now we're talking 8 or 9 years, and then you make the wine and probably age it a little bit longer. So now you're 3 more years in it. So now you're 12 or 13 years before you're really in the bottle with a mature Nebbiolo. And then those wines need to age for another 10 years. And so we're looking at this. I mean, this is a really cool passion project. But we're talking about something that we may not actually get to drink in its full expression for 20 years. I mean, even Josh is going to be old at that point, and I'm gonna be a great grandpa. But I still think it's something that we're going to do. I just think it'd be pretty interesting to see how Nebbiolo can do in the Walla Walla Valley. Be a long-term experiment. But it's, why not? It's worth trying. It's a long-term business anyway. One funny story that we should have, if we were better at what we knew business wise back in the day, would have done this. But when we early on, we were making wine at a custom crush facility. I won't name it because I don't want it to negatively affect them, but it's sort of a funny story. They were doing pump overs, and pump overs, you got a bunch of different wineries making wine, and guys are in there late and very, very tired. They work incredibly long hours. And there was an accidental pump over of somebody else's Merlot into our Cabernet as they're doing pump overs. They just got, confused as to which tank they were on. And rather than pumping the wine from back into the same tank, they pumped it into our tank. And we ended up having to just like bulk that wine off because, well, it's just that, it's not ours. And, if we did that now, we would come up with some interesting name for it as the big mistake and sell it. But we just didn't know what we were doing at that point. We also didn't want to dilute the Doubleback deal. But anyway, so I'm going to ask Josh one last question, and then I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap up. Well, there's two. We'll answer the other one too. But we're talking about when do we plan on opening membership with the new project with the Bledsoe McDaniels winery. And I'm sitting right here, so I've got a little admire the beautiful label that we have here, which we don't have yet. But this is Lafort Syrah, Bledsoe McDaniels Lafort Syrah, here in this Shiner bottle. Really excited about the project. I've been sipping on the wines the last couple of days, and a little bottle age is really starting to blow these things up. And now that I've had this one open since yesterday, it's really starting to shine. So excited about the wines. Going to release them in the fall, right, Josh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're targeting October for release date. So pretty excited about that. I think October 13th. So don't quote me on that, but keep an eye out for what we're doing.
Yeah,
I do want to address one thing. I do believe my wife bought that green couch behind me just as a backup plan in case she ever needs to kick me out of the house. I've never slept on it before. I saw the question in the comments, but time will tell.
Yeah, you're still young, Josh. You got a lot of screw ups in your life ahead of you. Well, and I haven't been paying attention to the questions up at the top, but oh yeah, Kim just chimed in. Yeah, Kim, you might have to see if he likes that couch tonight.
Yeah,
Kim just chimed. Oh, and then and how will we get that Bloodson McDaniel's wine? You guys are all VIPs and special to us. On our list, you'll receive a notification. It's again, especially first vintage, going to be really small production. So if you want to lay hands on it, feel free to reach out to our team and let them know that you want to be high on that list, and we'll make sure that as many people get it as possible.
I'm drinking the 2018 Pinot Noir too right now from Bloodson McDaniel. So excited about these wines, and I don't know if you have anything else, Drew, but I want to say thank you to everyone. You guys are such an incredible support group for us and our staff, and when our staff reaches out to you, you're always kind and support us in such great ways. It's a tremendous feeling to be blessed with a group of great VIPs like you guys. So thank you and cheers.
Amen, Josh. Amen. Hey, thank you all for supporting our business. Many of you for many, many years, and hopefully things get back to normal here soon, and so you can come back and see us. But in the interim, cheers, guys.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed the wines. Hope to see you soon.
There you go. We'll see you soon. All right. Bye-bye. Nice work, Josh.
You too. Thanks, Drew.